The Zorathian Grand Observer tilted its massive head, a cascade of shimmering, scale-like plates catching the low ambient light of the monitoring chamber. Its many eyes flickered with the soft glow of 100 different holographic feeds, each one depicting humans in their natural environment. Some were caught in moments of mundane routine, walking dogs, laughing in cafes, tending crops. Others were embroiled in their characteristic chaos, arguing in crowded marketplaces, innovating in bustling laboratories, or huddled in desperate solidarity amidst disasters of their own making. "They are fascinating," murmured the Grand Observer, its voice resonating through the chamber like distant thunder. "They are chaotic," corrected Analyst Rex, a younger Zorth with a more angular frame and fewer battle-worn grooves in its plating. Threx's voice carried the crisp, unyielding tone of logic. "Their unpredictability undermines their potential value as a domesticated species. Perhaps," the observer conceded, its gaze lingering on a feed of a human child building something intricate out of brightly colored blocks. The child's face twisted with concentration, her small hands moving with purpose, only to erupt into laughter when her creation toppled. And yet, their emotional expressiveness is unlike anything we have encountered. They create, destroy, and laugh in the same moment. Is that not intriguing? Threx shifted, its plates clicking softly. Intriguing, yes. Practical? No. These creatures lack the stability necessary for integration into our ecosystem. We should focus our efforts on more docile species. The Grand Observer paused, the room falling into an uneasy silence. Across the chamber, other Zora scientists observed the exchange without interruption, their hive-mind connection allowing the debate to ripple silently among them. Yet the Grand Observer's individuality, rare among their kind, lent weight to its words. "Practicality is not our sole directive, Threx. Curiosity drives us forward as much as efficiency. Humans challenge our understanding of what it means to be intelligent. They may hold answers to questions we have yet to ask." The chamber's light dimmed briefly as a decision solidified within the collective. The Zorth operated on consensus, and though dissent flickered through the network, the Grand Observer's authority tipped the balance. A test would proceed. A small group of humans would be observed in a controlled environment. The decision sparked a flurry of activity. Teams were assembled, parameters were set, and a ship was dispatched toward Earth under the guise of stealth. The humans had long suspected the existence of extraterrestrial life, but their primitive technology ensured their skies were blind to the Zortha's advanced cloaking mechanisms. The abduction itself was surgical in its precision. The Zorathian ship hovered silently over a rural farmhouse where the night stretched thick and undisturbed. Within moments, a beam of faintly shimmering light enveloped the house. Time seemed to freeze within its radius. The chirping crickets, the barking dog, the faint rustle of the wind, all suspended as the occupants were lifted aboard. Inside the ship, the humans were separated into sterile, glass-like cells that adjusted in temperature and atmosphere to ensure their survival. A young woman in a faded plaid shirt pounded her fists against the barrier, shouting demands. Beside her, an older man in dirt-streaked overalls sat quietly, his face etched with years of labor and wisdom. The third cell contained a boy no older than 9, clutching a stuffed bear and blinking back tears as his wide eyes took in the alien surroundings. The Grand Observer watched them from an elevated platform, its eyes flickering with interest. Their emotional spectrum is immediately evident, it noted, its voice projecting to the surrounding scientists. Fear, confusion, defiance. Each response carries weight. Record everything. The woman's voice rang out sharply, breaking the sterile quiet. "Who are you? Where are we? Let us go." She slammed her palms against the translucent wall, her voice trembling but fierce. The Zorth did not answer. Communication protocols had yet to be calibrated, and even if they had, the hive mind debated whether addressing the humans' questions would serve the experiment. Instead, the Grand Observer turned to Analyst Rex. "Begin initial tests. Observe their responses. The cells shifted subtly, their floors changing texture, the walls releasing unfamiliar sounds and faint scents designed to gauge the human sensory limits. The boy whimpered, curling into a corner, while the man narrowed his eyes, his weathered hands flexing as if preparing for a fight. The woman, however, remained upright, her gaze darting between her captors and her surroundings, searching for weaknesses. Fascinating, the observer murmured. Even in confinement, their drive to resist is remarkable. Threx tilted its head. Remarkable or inconvenient? They are defiant to the point of recklessness. Observe the male. His physical gestures suggest he is preparing for confrontation despite overwhelming odds. Such behaviors indicate a failure to adapt, or an unwillingness to surrender, the observer countered. A trait that has allowed their species to thrive. Over the next several hours, the humans were subjected to a series of carefully orchestrated trials. The cells adjusted to mimic Earth-like conditions, then shifted to simulate harsher environments. Searing heat, bitter cold, disorienting gravity fluctuations. The Zorth expected rapid capitulation, but the humans proved resilient. The older man gritted his teeth through the heat and wrapped his arms around the boy when the cold came. The woman, despite her visible exhaustion, used her voice to calm the child, telling stories that seemed to soothe his fear. They are protecting the weakest among them, Threx observed, its tone tinged with something resembling incredulity. Such behavior is counterproductive. Resources should be conserved for the strong, not for humans, the observer said, watching intently. For them, community is strength. By the time the test concluded, the humans were physically drained but mentally unbroken. The woman leaned heavily against the wall of her cell, sweat glistening on her brow, but her eyes remained sharp. The boy had fallen asleep against the older man, whose callous hands rested protectively on the child's shoulder. The Zorus scientists exchanged silent glances, their hive mind buzzing with conflicted assessments. They are more resilient than anticipated, Threx admitted reluctantly, but their unpredictability remains a liability. The Grand Observer's eyes glimmered with something akin to satisfaction. Resilience and unpredictability are not liabilities, Threx. They are what make humans remarkable. This is only the beginning. As the humans slept fitfully, unaware of what trials awaited them, the observer turned back to the holographic feeds. Somewhere in the depths of its complex mind, a new question took root. What, exactly, had they brought aboard? The sterile hum of the alien vessel was constant, an oppressive backdrop to the human's captivity. Anna sat cross-legged on the floor of her cell, her knuckles raw from hours of pounding on the unyielding walls. She studied her captors, their insectal frames moving with precision, their eyeless faces unreadable. Each action they took seemed deliberate, measured. To them, she and the others were little more than lab rats. "Stay calm," she muttered, though she wasn't sure whether she was talking to herself or the others. Her voice was hoarse from shouting, and her muscles ached from her futile attempts at escape. Across from her, through the shimmering barrier separating their cells, the farmer, his name was Frank, she learned, was staring at the child, his brow furrowed in thought. "Kid's been quiet for too long," Frank said. His voice was gravelly, the kind that came from decades of shouting over machinery. He adjusted his position, his shoulders hunched as if trying to shield the boy even from the air itself. "What's your name, son?" "Ben," the boy murmured, his arms wrapped tightly around his knees. His stuffed bear, now grimy from the ordeal, rested limply in his lap. "Are we going to die here?" Anna's chest tightened at the raw fear in his voice. She wanted to tell him no, to offer some kind of reassurance, but the truth was, she didn't know. Instead, she forced a small, grim smile. "Not if I can help it." Before Ben could respond, the walls of their cells shimmered and the ground beneath them shifted. The seamless surface dissolved into a spongy texture, emitting faint vibrations that set Anna's teeth on edge. The change was accompanied by a low tone, almost musical, that seemed to vibrate in her skull. Anna staggered to her feet, her heart pounding. What now? She hissed, more to herself than anyone else. Frank, ever the pragmatist, planted his feet firmly and studied his surroundings with narrowed eyes. They're testing us, seeing how we react. Why? Anna snapped, her frustration boiling over. What could they possibly gain from this? We're not lab animals. Maybe they don't see it that way, Frank replied grimly. Or maybe they don't care. The Zorth observed from a raised platform, their angular bodies silhouetted against the glow of their instruments. To them, the humans were fascinating in their defiance. The female, whom their records identified as Anna, displayed a remarkable combination of aggression and ingenuity. The older male, Frank, was steady and protective, while the child, though fragile, exhibited surprising resilience for his size and age. They adapt quickly, analyst Rex noted as it observed Anna experimenting with the new texture of her cell's floor. She pressed her weight into it, testing its give, her expression one of grim determination. They seek to understand their environment, even under duress. The Grand Observer's multifaceted eyes flickered as it replied, and in their understanding they find strength. It is no wonder they have thrived on their chaotic world. Meanwhile, in the cells, Anna crouched low, running her fingers along the floor. It wasn't just spongy. It seemed to pulse faintly like a heartbeat. She pressed harder, and the vibrations intensified, sending a jolt up her arm. She gritted her teeth, ignoring the discomfort, and turned to Frank. It's reacting to us, she said. I don't know how, but it's alive, or at least something close to it. Frank nodded, his jaw set. So, what's the play? Anna hesitated, her mind racing. She didn't know if there was a play. Every move they made seemed to be met with calculated indifference from their captors. But as she glanced at Ben, his small frame trembling in the corner, she knew giving up wasn't an option. We fight back, she said, her voice steady. Not with fists. We've tried that. We think. We outsmart them. Frank raised an eyebrow. Outsmart a bunch of aliens with tech we don't understand. They don't understand us either, Anna countered. That's our edge. Frank grunted, his expression skeptical but not dismissive. All right then, what do you have in mind? Anna didn't get a chance to answer. Without warning, the barriers separating their cells dissolved, and the three humans were herded into a larger chamber. The walls shimmered with light, forming intricate patterns that seemed to pulse in time with the faint hum of the ship. In the center of the room stood a series of strange, oblong objects that resembled tables, or perhaps restraints. The Zorth communicated silently, their hive mind buzzing with anticipation. This was the next phase of the experiment. Direct interaction. The humans would be exposed to stimuli designed to test their mental and emotional limits. Anna felt her chest tighten as she took in the sight of the devices. Her instincts screamed at her to run, but there was nowhere to go. She glanced at Frank, who gave her a curt nod, his eyes hard and determined. Ben clung to his bear, his small hands trembling. Stay close to me, Frank said, his voice low but firm. He placed a protective hand on Ben's shoulder, his posture radiating quiet strength. The Zorth moved closer, their insectal forms towering over the humans. One of them gestured toward the devices, its clawed appendage emitting a faint glow. The meaning was clear. Comply. Anna's mind raced. They couldn't fight, not physically at least. But maybe they didn't have to. The Zorth might have advanced technology, but they lacked something humans had in abundance. Unpredictability. Follow my lead, she whispered, her eyes locking with Frank's. He hesitated for only a moment before nodding. As the Zorth approached, Anna stepped forward, her hands raised in mock surrender. But instead of moving toward the device, she began to speak. Quickly, loudly, and with purpose. She rattled off questions, her tone sharp and demanding. What do you want from us? Why are you doing this? What's the point? The Zorth hesitated, their movements faltering. Communication among their kind was swift and silent, but human speech. Its cadence, its unpredictability, was something they had yet to fully grasp. Anna's barrage of questions disrupted their rhythm, creating a flicker of uncertainty in their otherwise precise actions. Frank caught on quickly, joining in. His voice was steady, his tone commanding. "You think you can control us? You don't know anything about us." Even Ben, emboldened by their defiance, stood a little taller, clutching his bear like a shield. "We're not afraid of you," he shouted, his small voice carrying a surprising weight. The Zorth recoiled slightly, their hive mind buzzing with confusion. The humans' response was not what they had anticipated. Instead of capitulating, they were asserting their agency, disrupting the carefully orchestrated experiment. The Grand Observer watched with a mixture of fascination and unease. The humans were not following the expected patterns. They were not merely subjects. They were actors, shaping the narrative in ways the Zorth had not accounted for. For the first time, the Observer felt a flicker of doubt. Perhaps they had underestimated the creatures they had brought aboard. The ship's atmosphere felt heavier now, the tension between captors and captives palpable in every interaction. Anna stood at the center of the chamber, her muscles taut, her mind racing. The Zorth were calculating and meticulous, but they'd made one critical error. They underestimated what desperation and determination could accomplish when fused together. Frank paced a few feet away, his boots scuffing against the shimmering floor. His face, lined with years of hard labor, was set in grim focus. "They're watching us, waiting for something," he muttered under his breath, his voice low enough that the nearby aliens wouldn't hear. "They want to break us," Anna replied, her eyes flicking toward Ben, who was huddled in the corner. The boy clung to his bear, but there was a flicker of defiance in his gaze, a strength that made Anna's chest tighten. She crouched beside him, her voice soft but firm. "Ben, I need you to be brave, okay? We're getting out of here, but I need you to trust me." Ben nodded, his grip on the bear tightening. "I'm not scared," he said, though his voice wavered slightly. "Not much." Anna smiled faintly. "Good. Hold on to that." The Zorth moved with their usual precision, their insectal forms gliding silently across the chamber as they adjusted panels and monitored holographic displays. Their hive mind hummed with efficiency, but there was an undercurrent of uncertainty now. The humans had not behaved as expected. Their resistance, though subtle, was eroding the Zorth's carefully constructed narrative of control. The Grand Observer watched from its elevated platform, its multifaceted eyes shimmering as it analyzed the humans' behavior. Their unpredictability was both fascinating and troubling. They had turned simple observation into a battle of wills, and the Observer couldn't shake the growing sense that this experiment was spiraling out of control. "They are destabilizing the environment," Analyst Rex remarked, its tone clipped. "Their defiance disrupts the intended structure of the test." The Observer remained silent for a moment, its gaze fixed on Anna. "Perhaps the test is not failing," it said finally. "Perhaps it is evolving." In the chamber below, Anna was already putting her plan into motion. Over the past hours, she had studied their captors, noting the way their technology seemed to respond to proximity and intent. The strange, living floor, the translucent walls, even the glowing panels. All of it seemed interconnected, like an extension of the Zorth themselves. If the aliens relied on their hive mind for control, perhaps that connection could be disrupted. She glanced at Frank, who caught her meaning with a single look. He gave a subtle nod, his hand brushing the pocket of his overalls where he'd hidden a jagged shard of alien material, a piece of the floor that had broken loose during one of their earlier tests. It wasn't much, but it was sharp enough to pry open the seams of the nearest panel. Frank moved first, his steps deliberate as he approached the wall. One of the Zorths shifted, its head tilting in silent observation. But Frank kept his movements casual, his posture unthreatening. He reached the wall and leaned against it, feigning exhaustion. With one hand, he palmed the shard and began working it into the seam, his motions slow and deliberate. At the same time, Anna began talking again, her voice loud and insistent. "You think you can control us? You think we're just going to sit here and let you poke and prod us like lab rats? She took a step toward the nearest Zorith, her body language bold and confrontational. You don't understand us at all, do you? The Zorith hesitated, their hive mind buzzing with analysis. The human's behavior was disruptive, but it was also fascinating. The Grand Observer leaned forward slightly, its interest piqued. They are asserting dominance, it murmured, an unusual trait for a captive species. While the aliens were distracted by Anna's performance, Frank managed to pry open the panel, revealing a mess of glowing circuits and pulsating organic material. He grimaced but didn't hesitate, jamming the shard into the tangle of wires. Sparks erupted, and the chamber shuddered violently. The Zorith reacted instantly, their movements sharp and coordinated as they attempted to stabilize the systems. The hum of their hive mind grew louder, filling the room with a resonant buzz that made Anna's skin crawl. But she didn't stop. If anything, she leaned into their chaos, pushing their focus further off balance. "What's the matter?" she taunted, her voice cutting through the din. "Didn't expect your pets to bite back." Frank worked quickly, tearing at the exposed circuitry with his hands. Each disruption sent another jolt through the ship, causing lights to flicker and walls to shimmer erratically. The living floor beneath them pulsed in agitation, its rhythm growing erratic. "Anna," Frank called out, his voice strained. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. This thing's coming apart." The Grand Observer rose to its full height, its voice booming across the chamber. "Cease this at once. You endanger yourselves as much as us." Anna turned toward the platform, her eyes blazing. "Then let us go." The Observer hesitated, its hive mind buzzing with deliberation. For all their advanced technology and intellect, the Zorith had not accounted for this level of resistance. The humans weren't simply reacting. They were forcing a negotiation. Before the Observer could respond, Ben stood up, clutching his bear tightly. His small voice rang out, clear and unwavering. "You're scared of us, aren't you?" The chamber fell silent. Even the Zorith paused, their hive mind rippling with unease. Anna felt a surge of pride and fear in equal measure. The kid had guts, but he was playing with fire. The Observer's eyes flickered, its towering form looming over them. "Fear is irrelevant. We seek only understanding." "You'll never understand us," Anna said, stepping forward to stand beside Ben. "Not like this. You think you can study us, control us, but humans aren't meant to be caged." Frank joined them, his broad shoulders squared. "We're not just going to roll over and let you win. You can let us go, or you can watch this ship fall apart. Your choice." The ship trembled, the vibrations growing stronger with every passing second. Lights flickered sporadically, casting shifting shadows across the chamber. The air felt charged, as if the ship itself was alive and panicking. Anna could see the Zorith scrambling, their previously fluid movements now sharp and erratic. Their hive mind buzzed audibly, an unsettling resonance that set her teeth on edge. Whatever Frank had done, it was working, but the cost was clear. The ship was coming apart at the seams. "Frank!" Anna shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "How bad is it?" Frank, still crouched by the exposed panel, yanked his hands free from the sparking circuits. His fingers were burned, his face grim. "Bad enough. Whatever this thing runs on, it doesn't like being tampered with. We've got minutes, maybe less, before something critical goes." The Grand Observer loomed above, its towering form framed by the failing light. Its multifaceted eyes burned with a mixture of fury and something that might have been fear. "You do not understand what you are doing," it intoned, its voice reverberating through the chamber. "This vessel is not merely a machine. It is alive, and you are destabilizing its core systems." "Good," Anna shot back, her fist clenched. "Maybe it's about time you understood what it feels like to lose control." The Observer hesitated, its many eyes flickering as if processing her words. The Zorith were a species built on order and precision, their hive mind ensuring unity in all things. The humans, with their chaos and defiance, were an anomaly they had not anticipated. And now, that anomaly was threatening to undo everything. Ben stepped closer to Anna, his small frame trembling but resolute. "Are we going to get out of here?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the rising hum of the ship. Anna crouched down, placing a hand on his shoulder. She forced herself to smile, though her heart pounded in her chest. "We are," she said firmly. "I promise." Frank joined them, his broad shoulders square despite the strain visible on his face. "The question is how. We can't just sit here and hope they'll let us walk out." Anna's mind raced, her gaze darting between the malfunctioning systems and their captors. The Zorith seemed momentarily paralyzed, their hive mind buzzing with indecision. It was clear they hadn't prepared for this level of resistance. That hesitation was their opening, if they could exploit it. She turned to the Grand Observer, meeting its gaze with unwavering determination. "You said this ship is alive," she said. "If that's true, then you can stop this. Stabilize it. But you won't have time unless you let us go." The Observer's many eyes narrowed, its head tilting slightly. "You threaten the survival of all aboard, including yourselves. This is illogical." "No," Anna countered, stepping forward. "What's illogical is thinking you can control us. Humans don't work like that. You want to understand us? Then listen. Right now, we're your best chance at saving this ship." Frank glanced at her sharply. "Anna, what are you doing?" "Giving them a choice," she said without looking back. "They can keep trying to control us, or they can trust us. It's their call." The chamber fell into a tense silence, broken only by the intermittent groans of the ship's failing systems. The Zorith exchanged rapid signals, their movements jittery and uncoordinated. For the first time, Anna saw something like doubt in their alien forms. Their hive mind, so efficient and unified, was struggling to reconcile the chaos the humans had brought aboard. Finally, the Grand Observer raised a clawed appendage, signaling the others. "Release them," it said, its voice heavy with reluctant authority. The shimmering walls of the chamber dissolved, the barriers separating the humans from their captors disappearing in an instant. Anna felt a rush of adrenaline as the reality of their freedom sank in, but she didn't allow herself to relax. "Not yet." "Frank, Ben, stay close," she said, her voice steady despite the tension coiled in her chest. She turned back to the Observer. "Now tell us how to get off this ship." The Observer gestured toward a glowing archway that had materialized at the far end of the chamber. "The escape vessel is through there. It will return you to your world." Anna narrowed her eyes. "And what about you? Are you going to fix this?" "We will attempt to stabilize the systems," the Observer replied. "But your interference has introduced variables we cannot predict. Your presence here has made survival uncertain." Anna held its gaze for a moment longer, searching for any hint of deceit. Finally, she nodded. "Come on," she said, motioning for Frank and Ben to follow. They moved quickly, the floor beneath them pulsing erratically as they ran. The hum of the ship grew louder, the vibrations more violent. Anna could feel the tension in every step, the knowledge that the Zorith's survival and their own hung by a thread. The escape vessel was small, its sleek design glowing faintly with the same bioluminescence that seemed to power the rest of the ship. Frank helped Ben climb inside, his large hands steady despite the chaos around them. Anna lingered at the entrance, her gaze flicking back toward the chamber they had left behind. The Zorith were scrambling to repair the damage, their movements frantic and disjointed. The Grand Observer stood at the center of the chaos, its towering form oddly still. For a moment, Anna felt a pang of something she couldn't quite name. Pity, perhaps, or understanding. "They'll figure it out," Frank said, his voice pulling her back. "Come on, Anna. Time to go." She nodded, stepping into the vessel. The door sealed behind her with a hiss, and the hum of the larger ship faded into the background as the escape craft powered up. As they hurtled away from the alien vessel, the three of them sat in silence, the weight of their ordeal settling over them. Ben clutched his bear tightly, his wide eyes fixed on the viewport as the stars blurred around them. Frank leaned back in his seat, his expression weary but relieved. Anna stared out into the void, her thoughts a tangled mess of relief, anger, and something else, something she couldn't quite name. They had survived, but the Zorth had learned something too. And though she didn't know if they would meet again, she knew one thing for certain. Humans were not a